Economic Development Committee meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Next is public comment. I've not had anyone approach me. Have you? No? All right. Well, then we will move on to number 4, approval of the January 9th, 2025 Extension Education and Economic Development Committee meeting minutes. I have a motion from Rosenberg, a second by Lemmer. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. Passes. Then we'll go on to number 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination, none. 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. We'll move down to B, which is discussion and possible action by EED to forward to County Board for consideration. 1, presentation from Corey Sillers regarding barriers to home builders and consideration by committee of next steps. So we had discussed a couple months ago about having someone come from the Builders Association. So thankfully and luckily we have Corey Sillers here to educate us on what's happening in our area and what his opinions are as far as what we could do as a committee to help alleviate our housing shortage. So thank you. Go ahead if you want to come up front or if you want to stay there. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, I'll just stay here. That's okay. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you on this topic of which every community that is wishing to increase their housing supply, because obviously there are some townships that wish to keep it farm fields and have nobody new move into their neighborhoods kind of idea. About myself, I started working with my dad way back in '84 when I was 12 years old. So I've been doing this a while. 93, started full-time with him after graduating from NTC in residential design. I've operated our business now on my own since 2012. In 2022, I was president of the Wisconsin Builders Association. In 2017, I was president of the Wausau Builders Association. And a few of you I see all the time at the Towns Association meeting. I'm a trustee for Red Mountain currently, and also am I a member of the Wausau School Board. So in the materials, and they'll be in the packet when the clerk takes care of scanning that in, I'll just go down my bullet points first. The National Association of Home Builders constantly does studies, and one of the numbers that I use when I go talk to lawmakers is the fact that on average across the U.S. there's $83,000 to $84,000 in a single new home that deals with regulation. That can be the permitting, that can be what we are required by code for sizing, for insulation, window sizes, and all the related. Then when we get into permitting and the wetlands and what the zoning allow and how dense we can be. So the cost of the buildable land and the lack of the developed lots, right? Just yesterday, matter of fact, I spoke with a landowner in Red Mountain because Red Mountain has been talking about the same topic for about a year, and we have Jared Grandy going out and attempting to persuade landowners to sell their land and to somebody. As a village, we don't care who necessarily, but to get more buildable lots. And it was a very instantaneous no way, even though they have a preliminary map drawn out by REI that's 20 years old now, but they have no intention of starting it, and they didn't want to sell me the little piece right up next to the road that has sewer and water to make it easy. I could get 5 houses there, just piece of cake, but. So that's been our biggest barrier, because in Red Mountain we have about 9 pieces of property that could be subdivided quite easily with services that are very simple to attach on, but nobody wants to seem to do that. There are a few infill lots. I'd probably say 10, 12. And I'm going to approach them as a builder and try to just gain more information. You know, are we waiting until, sometimes it's, I'm going to let my kids take care of it kind of idea. Well, that's nice of you, but we would really like to build some houses right now. And then, there's always a challenge when you wish to create an area. And in Remount, we have that challenge. Many people prefer the single-family homes instead of having a duplex or multifamily, no townhouses. So we don't have a mix. There's some by the DMV building down along there next to the highway that are all duplexes and those are all built up. So the few and another thing we're finding is the developers, Bill Shinuski just did his second edition by South Mountain School, 48 lots. He's keeping all the lots for himself. He's going to build, as the market shows, 3. He's got 3 started already. The roads just have a gravel base at the moment. And he's just going to keep doing that. He's all done selling them out. I believe Heath Tappy and his group does the same kind of thing in the Corona Witter area, right? So it's tough for other builders to build in subdivisions, but there's always I'd say 3 to 5% of our population that can always afford a new house and will always be upgrading what they have. And it seems to be kind of the norm for the last 20, 30 years. There always seems to be just a few, right? As long as you have a piece of land. Something that I guess we've talked about at Remountain is landowners that have larger parcels and then decide to put one house in the middle. We have a few residents that wish to do that. We are in conversations with them based upon our future proposed roads, and it's on our official map. So we're doing some negotiation with them to at least, if the road would go through their property, that house would be situated where it could be subdivided each way. It wouldn't affect their house, wouldn't affect where the road has been mapped out. So people obviously should be able to do what they wish with their piece of land. Just try to get them to understand, how the lack of new housing, the lack of increased valuation in each municipality, how that is going to eventually affect their taxes. If you don't want neighbors and our service costs go up every single year, then somebody's got to pay for it, right? And so then we end up having to raise taxes. A great example, a story here that I put in that's labeled the overregulation is the example that I have been going through personally with my client with the multiple levels of regulation and permitting. And this time it doesn't deal with simplifying the platting requirements. It's just that my client started last February with REI. He has a lot next to Lake Wausau in the floodplain, was working through that. FEMA waited till the last week that they had to approve it and said, oh no, you used the wrong form. So you have to resubmit everything. And we're like, no, not for this situation. If you actually read your regulation, it was correct. Well, that led us to not being able to get any kind of permit from the village or Mountain to begin. However, everything, Jared Grandy, again, was going to help issue that with the zoning side of things now that the village takes care of their zoning. It was end of October, right there before it was going to freeze up. Blacktop, we couldn't get over blacktop. We cut the road in. They let us put the lateral in. but I couldn't bring any dirt because the DNR now wanted something, and the stuff that REI had passed on was supposed to be okay, right? So you have multiple people in the chain that are interpreting the rules differently, and DNR also, as I have in the article, it's like I felt they didn't know what they were supposed to do or not do. And they didn't want to make a decision that maybe would come back and, bite them in the butt later kind of thing. So they just didn't give us an answer. They waited 3 months. And then Jared went through all the regs and said, you need to give us this. If you don't give it to us, I don't care anymore kind of deal. I'm going to give them the permit to do it. So now with that, they actually did respond. So now we're okay with them, but now we're doing the H&H work with REI again to send off basically the exact same information from a year ago back to FEMA. And when we get the H&H approved, then I can fill the lot up the 3 feet to get it to its finished grade. But then FEMA has 30 to 90 days to approve that. So a project that I started talking with the client about in July of 24, maybe the end of May of 25, I'll finally be able to put some concrete in place and get going. So how does this is the multiple layer of regulation. How does this affect the cost? Well, if I could have started actually building in August, because if the whole process was shortened up where each agency has 4 to 6 months max, that you should be able to accomplish all of these things, especially when you have an outside engineering firm, right, that has the qualifications, but then the DNR questions them, FEMA might question them. Well, why do you have them certified? They're doing the work for you. They're certified. Them stamping it should be done. You're done. Give us the permits so we can get going. So since July, August, there have been the doors, exterior doors, siding, windows, now shingles, everything, those items already are going up anywhere from 7 to 11%. And a few of them already did. Concrete always goes up a couple dollars a yard every February, March. Windows typically at the same time. So now on a house that could have cost like $980,000, now we're going to just add on 10%. And we're just going to barely be within my client's budget. So that's the first thing. Just hard costs of the materials and labor are increasing the longer it takes to get through permitting. So cleaning up permitting is definitely a big hurdle and would be a great benefit. Second thing is my client's on his second bank because things were going too slow for the first bank. They said, no, we're not going to give you anything. So he moved on to the second bank. So the financial side too. And just securing the loan for him and then also whatever changes in interest rates there may be. Now, we might have hit that one on the good side if the Fed decides to lower the interest rate even by another quarter in the third or fourth quarter of this year, right? So that side might be improving a bit. I participate quite a bit in traveling to Madison or just meeting with the legislature members now I do school topics besides land topics and construction topics, obviously, but one of the things that the Wisconsin Builders Association was working with the realtors on was the changes to Trans 233. And I have that in the packet, the positive example. Colby Mouche Builders lives out near Hatley area. He bought land in Shawano County. Because of those changes, he was able to have more lots in his subdivision because he was able to put a stormwater pond within that 50-foot setback next to Highway 29. And we know that, like 29, we're never going to get big enough for population where we need to have a 6-lane highway going from Wausau to Green Bay. So those are the type of logical things that we try to work with and work through the legislature and get those things done. The other examples, the other example was, over in Eau Claire County, and where the town approved the plat, county said no because supervisors influenced each other and denied it. So they went to the city of Eau Claire, and they, I forgot what Jared said, like a balloon on a string. We took a little tiny strip of land from city of Eau Claire right through whatever to get out to where that new subdivision was going to be. And now because it falls under the city of Eau Claire, he could have more lots. He got additional services, and town of Washington, well, lost the land now to Eau Claire, but we gained the housing units. So we're not, again, different levels of government need to work together to streamline everything. Because at the end of the day, I really think that more valuation in our tax base, every single level benefits, right? And if we have more people here, then we get more sales tax, and it has a snowball effect. A couple of the other resources, Tom Redens, partially retired from REI, but he provided this chart here of this road section with some pricing on it. Now, obviously rural areas, you're not going to have the curb and gutter portion of it. But when he gave us this 2 years ago, almost, well, it's over 2 years, it was basically $460 a lineal foot for every foot of road and sewer pipe, curbing, $460 every foot, right? So 1,000-foot road to get into the lots, lots of money up front, right? And that would be one suggestion. There's a couple builder developers in the Green Bay area. They have worked with the townships, and Eugene Zaromsky did the same thing on Magnolia and Juniper when he installed sewer and water there. Town of Rim Mountain at that time worked with Eugene to put in the sewer and water. The town held that note. As Eugene sold lots, he paid that off so that he didn't have to front that money, and we got more housing. Because interest rates for the developer could be 6 to 8%, right? Depending, and that's what I just got told a few days ago when I called Abbey Bank about just land. But municipalities can get it for a lot less, right? So that type of partnership has been worked for Eugene, works over by Green Bay, same kind of idea. And those partnerships can be an important tool to keep the costs down. It's that upfront cost. I would love it if people who have a couple 40s, right next to the city, if a developer could make a deal with them instead of just outright selling it. You have the land. You've had the land for 30, 40, 50, 60 years in some cases, in some families, right? You have pennies in the land. I can't buy that land from you for 20, 30,000 an acre and then put all the infrastructure in and then expect to make anything. It's not worth my time, right? But if we could work together and I pay for the roads and such, you hold the land, and then I pay you something for the land as we go, there could be a partnership of sorts there. The red sheet is what my EO at Wisconsin Builders Association, Brad Boykes, put together this year for our newest freshman legislators in Madison to get them to think about how housing affects so many parts of our workforce. 80, I remember a number from many years ago, 82 different trades or manufacturers or people or services go into every house all along that chain. There's up to 82, different people who are part of that economic cycle. And then the other piece is just NAHB does many studies, like I had mentioned earlier, and that's just one article about how builders can come before communities and use that as a tool, as a talking point thing. But it has good suggestions just in general. So there's no, instead of me coming in and showing it to you, you having it as a resource. And then the best one, which is the League of Municipalities, the Wisconsin Builders Association, and then the Wisconsin Realtors Association, have 11 videos and articles, and I printed off one of the articles for you. And the website is here in the packet, in the blue, on the one page. And that it goes through and discusses some of the things I have in my bullet points at the beginning of my packet, offers up solutions, offers up how to, do presentations and get municipalities to understand the importance of density and how you can put, we have a couple in Intermountain that are 4 to 6 acres, single family housing around that. But if we could have a very positive looking project, not crazy exterior designs, right, of 2-story townhouses, and have that infill be higher density, then the not in my backyard NIMBYs hopefully wouldn't be quite as loud, right? And the sales pitch on that one is simply, yeah, you're going to have a few more cars going down your road. Instead of 10, you might have 30, right? But your taxes aren't going up. And we're just going to plow right around the corner. They're going to help pay for the utilities, where Remote has a new water plant we're building, right? So a lot more tax base, everybody pays a little less. I understand the challenges, because I said at Remote we are attempting to do whatever we can to coax people into building. And I sit on our planning commission. I'm much more lenient being a builder. Not that I don't care about the environment, but I think there's a partnership there where we can be responsible for the environment and still accomplish getting more housing units. And a lot of times that's through higher density. And you have a high density going right here. You can have another one by West Side Battery, right? And they're going to be nice looking buildings, and they serve the purpose. So it can be done. It's not going to be a 3, 4, or 5-story building in our townships, but there's no reason why it can't be 2-story townhouses. There are economic grants that, again, this coalition of the Builders Association Realtors were able to pass last session. So there's grants and low interest loans for taking, Voss Studios or Evolutions, those types of buildings, having retail on the bottom, having apartments above. If you have a building that's, too old, dilapidated kind of thing, there's funds available that builders, developers, and the city or the municipality, I know at least one of them, has to be involved with it. So it becomes a partnership. So those are the things that we've been working on. That's what we work towards. It's making little steps all the time, the best we can. To sometimes it's like just keeping your whole finger in the hole, to not letting more water come in and hold the costs down. A real good example on that is with our electrical code. We were on the 2011 electrical code for quite a while and just adopt the 17 in 2020. So in the 17 code, we had to use all arc fault breakers in the panel, unless it was a single receptacle or it was a 2-pole, a 240 like your oven, right? The people who want us to move on to the 24 code, so we're so far behind. Every time we do that, there's more things in there from different manufacturers. So going from the 11 to the 17, that was a $4,000 jump on a new house with just the electrical requirements. So now if we go from the 17 to the 20 or 24, I guarantee it's going to be at least another 4,000, if not more, because of the requirements that continually get built in. And unfortunately, manufacturers come and coerce, I'll say it that way, because that's what I think. They coerce the people on those committees to change it so that their product, and they always say it's about safety. Some of the safety is really about the older houses with the old wire, and it's not the new houses that are catching on fire and burning down. It's the old houses, but you have no way to police that because it's existing. So you just hope something go to heck, right? Except in the 17, the example that does go back to that is you have to you'll have to change the breaker panel. When you change the breaker panel out, then you use all arc faults. So it does help mitigate some of that. You're not changing the wire, but now you have, if there's a fault in the line, at least that breaker's kicking out and hopefully not burning down the house, right? The owner would notice that there is a problem and try to get that resolved. So again, you have the packet, you read at your leisure, trying to create partnerships between government and developers or builders is a great way to do that. Streamlining zoning wherever you can is obviously another thing that's going to be important. We understand, and I have it as a bullet point, when you're putting in stormwater and new roads, whether it's the county level or the town or village, they might not have staff that is qualified. So we're gonna have that requirement, yet that they need to have a third-party engineer, third-party inspector go out, take a look at that, make sure it's installed correctly, so that we don't have to dig the road up later, kind of idea. Developers understand that. Again, Bill Chinuski, because it's in his developer's agreement, that was $42,000 extra for him to have somebody stand there, watch the plumber put the pipes in, right? And they're master plumbers. They're putting it in at the right pitch and things. So, but there it's private funds. If it was public funds doing the projects, I kind of get it, right? Because we need to be very good stewards with the public funding. We want to guarantee that we're not going to have to pay for it again, tear it back out kind of thing. Lilac, we're going to rebuild Lilac by Culvers and Quick Trip and River Mountain. $80,000 for the guy to stand there and watch him put everything in. That's our extra inspection fee. So on that thought, there's I put in here just what our normal fee schedule is for River Mountain for a new house. There's a dozen things on there. So it doesn't matter what the project is, what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to have some regulations. We're going to have third-party inspectors, streamlining everything, making it easy to get that information to the government official, but making it easy to approve it on a quicker timeline is obviously another avenue to help keep things moving along, as I said about banking or just the cost of hard materials going up across the board. So do you have any specific questions? And if I can't answer them, I'll be happy to find some answers for you.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
Am I on? Yes. How do you, without inspections and regulations, how do you keep the bad actors on the straight and narrow?
I completely understand that part. I've had I don't want to make it out that I feel I'm better than anybody else. But my background is simple. My dad went through journeyman carpenter, worked for Wergeen first, went out on his own, taught our other gentleman, Mr. Krieger, that worked for us for 42 years. They both taught me. Good background. I guess you could go back and look at our amount of court cases. I don't even think we've had 5 in 50 years. We've been around 50 years. We have a lot of repeat clients, but you're right. A lot of times what happens because of kind of a lack of regulation, but we want to have a free market society. Carpentry or being a builder, we only have a 12-hour class. You take the 12-hour class, you get a dwelling contractor's license. That's it. Doesn't mean you could be 8, and it's even better because I found out a few years ago they're teaching the students that go through the residential design class at the Tech. You take that class, you take that 12 hours in one of your classes, so they have a dwelling qualifier already. You just know how to draw stuff and you do estimating. If you don't have a good teacher or another way to gain that knowledge, what happens is the inspector is now becoming your teacher because, you didn't put the blocking in the right spot. You didn't, why don't you have, a column here under where you have a point load coming down? Those kind of things. Then it falls to needing to have building inspectors or electrical or plumbing. Well, electrical and plumbing ain't quite so bad because you have to be an apprentice for 7 years before you can get your master's in electrical or plumbing. So that's, you can't stop that. Now, a lot of you know Arden Emmerich, I bet, or maybe heard his name. I brought that up to Arden, and Arden says, it's not our job to police that by increasing regulation over our 12-hour class or having another class and that type of apprenticeship. It's the public, it's the client, it's the customer's responsibility, the market's responsibility to do research and figure out who the goods and bads are. And if you're only going to pick somebody on cost, then you might have a problem, right? If you're going to look at experience and get references, that's on the, he always said that was on the customer, which it is at the end of the day, but I personally, I wouldn't sleep at night if I can't operate like that. I just don't, that's not who I am, so.
The reason I ask is you don't want those homes in your community either. We're going to build a bunch of houses, but I don't know, years ago there was a contractor who was pouring all the footings in the basement floors all in one pour. Great for him, bad for the house.
Yeah, bad for the house.
Puts the cheapest windows in, isn't real careful about the insulation.
And that still exists. 100%, that still exists.
Yeah, but I know a little bit about construction, mostly manufacturing piece of it, not residential. But I wouldn't be able to find a contractor by going through the phone book or not knowing. I have a contractor I work with. I have a complete trust in him because he's always been good to me, and he always explains it. Mm-hmm. And he always explains what's code. And he always explains why he's doing whatever he's doing. So, but I guess the regulations and inspections are there, so all that doesn't slide through. And
I agree with you. I agree with you because my colleagues that will say do it the right way automatically, right? Those aren't the ones we're worried about. But we have good personal relationships with the inspectors. They come through and say, oh, you forgot that. Oh, sure enough. Yeah. I told one guy in my crew, we were doing a lot of things, we didn't get it, right? No big deal. When the house isn't level and plumb and the drywaller, heard lots of different stories. Drywaller's cutting an inch off one end and 3 inches off the other because that's how bad the wall bows. Those are things we don't want, right? But it's built to code. If it isn't, just because it's out of plumb, that doesn't, it's still a code. It's a bad product. And the inspector's only going to have so much authority to get those things corrected. It's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle. And I said Art Emmerich's comment that, it's the customer and they have to do research. Or rely on people who want to be part of the ABC contractors for bigger commercial projects, or even light commercial office buildings, members in there, or Wassa Builders Association, Wisconsin Builders, gives you a level of credibility. And if you show some participation and we have extra training that's available, that's an avenue to better the people doing the work. But I agree. I don't know. I don't have the answer of how we can completely get rid of it.
Thank you.
I have a question. So we are discussing possibly imposing a covenant on tax deed parcels that go up for sale. And based on what you've said regarding different regulations and going through all the red tape with getting permits from all these different entities such as FEMA and the DNR, et cetera, we were thinking 24 months to have to build within 24 months of acquiring that property. What's your professional opinion on that time frame?
Due to the lack of available land to put any housing, the village of Vermountain did the exact same thing as what you're proposing. We had a couple parcels that went out on RFP. We only got one bid. The builder wanted a long time and said, no, you got to do it within 2 years. Well, somebody found out that he owned it. He started one, he sold that one and built the other one. They were both done in 8 months with both of them. And I think that, in certain areas, I would bet that would be the thing. So I don't think it's a bad thing, because the purpose, I think you're offering something at a potentially lower than market price. If that was an empty lot, maybe it would go for $60,000, but because of the tax deed stuff, the person's paying, just an example, $15,000, $20,000, right? You don't want that sitting there. I don't think they're already getting in that situation. You're getting an upfront deal, so that should help incentivize. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I know that was talked about at the meeting at the Western Towns Association just last week.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Going once? Going twice? Thank you very
Okay.
much
Well,
for
I
all your
appreciate the
information.
time, and I said if you have any other questions, you want to email me, or give me a call, that's totally fine, after you look through the packet more. But I hope the resources are good, so thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to 6B2, discussing the resolution to expand availability of workforce housing by imposing restrictive covenants on properties acquired via tax foreclosure. Who wants to start? Would you like to start?
I'd love to.
Fantastic.
Mike's going to get a mic. He'll take it from me. But this is a follow-up from your last conversation. We were able to get information from Bayfield, and Mike did a great job of getting the resolution and all, as well as some amendments to the ordinance to really put those things in your code to move forward with the expansion of availability of workforce housing. So here you go, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Sorry for the dance show. Yeah, so, and sorry this came so late today, but had a little issue earlier or last week. But the first thing I did was to take a look at the covenant language that had been expressed, and the idea there was to figure out, how we best throw that covenant language into operation. And initially, I had just drafted it in a resolution to say, moving forward when we're addressing the sale of tax delinquent property, we're going to require that for unimproved but buildable parcels, so parcels that can be built on but are currently unimproved, building construction and occupancy would have to occur within 24 months of purchase. And then for all properties that were acquired by tax deed or through the tax delinquency process, those would all have covenants prohibiting short-term rentals within 10 years of the purchase date to kind of address those housing needs. And again, as Lance indicated, kind of stealing from Bayfield County's ideas and adopting them here. As I was going through that process, the thought occurred to me that it would be very smart for future officials, staff, to actually have this in our code of ordinances. We have a code section 3.20 that actually talks about the sale of tax delinquent properties. So it seemed to make a lot of sense to put these requirements in code so that in 5 years when we're looking back, we can see in black and white what those requirements are. As I was doing that, of course, my lawyer brain decided to tell me, well, if you're modifying this code section, it really would make a lot of sense to also update it so it's consistent with some recent United States Supreme Court rulings that basically say that when the county acquires a property by tax deed or in any other way acquires a tax delinquent property, once we sell that property, if we sell it for more than we have in it in unpaid taxes and the cost to actually acquire and sell the property, we now are required to return that excess to the former owner, regardless of anything else. The Supreme Court was very clear in the recent case that that is a requirement. Wisconsin state law has been updated to mirror that requirement. So I thought it would be a wise idea that we update our ordinances to be compliant with that as well. Wisconsin law also updated to put some timeframes. Once a tax delinquent property is acquired by a county, there are now some specific timeframes that the property has to be sold. Right now, a property has to be sold within 240 days of acquisition. By 2026, it has to be sold within 180 days of acquisition. So then the idea behind one of the additions in the code was to put that 180 days in there so it's clear to everyone looking at the process, no matter who's picking it up, that we have that time period. I also made a few changes in here just to make it clear that we have to do our best to sell the properties that we acquire by tax deed and not artificially diminish the value, because let's say we acquire a property by tax deed and then we do something that reduces the value when we sell it. There is a legal argument to be made that we would owe the former owner that amount that we reduced the property's value by, because even though we weren't able to recover that amount in sale, they could have had that value. And the Supreme Court has said, once we acquired it, we've done a governmental taking of the property. There'd be a pretty strong argument against the county for that difference. So that's a lot, and I sent it to you today. So I completely understand if no one has had a chance to ruminate on this. The idea, I think it would make sense to do it all at one time, but I think you could do it piecemeal. You could say, we want these covenants in place moving forward, and then next month we could, or whenever, we could come through and change the ordinance, or you could do it all at once. So both options are in the packet, or you could say, we want to think about this a little bit more, and that's completely fine too. So I have both options in the packet. I think if the ordinance were to be amended, I think that would need to go to HR Finance and Property because they have jurisdiction over the tax deed process. So that's what I did, and that's what's before you.
Questions or discussion? Supervisor Rosenberg?
Could a case be made that we reduce the value of that property by putting these covenants on it?
It's a great question. I don't know. From everything that we've heard about the current housing market, it doesn't seem like these covenants would actually impact the sale value. And I think if we look at, the properties that we recently listed, they all were sold relatively quickly. That being said, could someone make that argument? They would have to obviously be able to prove the damages. I think it's always a potential that someone could make that argument. The more restrictive those covenants are, the more likely that argument would hold water, which is why we tried to be less restrictive. But I think you're thinking about the right things when you consider whether putting these covenants in place is good policy. Is that going to create a liability? I'm going to give you the lawyer answer of maybe.
Can I add one thing? I think, thank you, Madam Chair, that your question, like Mike said, is spot on. Looking back at our recent experience, so we had the first batch, what we called it, the first batch of in-rem takings. We started with 50 properties. I think we ended up taking 15 or 18. We sold 12. We still have a couple more to sell. But like Mike said, not only did they sell quickly, but the values, I think it's important to note, like Mike said, the threshold question is, it's not only did these covenants diminish the value, but the second part is, are we owed more in back taxes? Is that liability above and beyond the amount of equity plus what that diminished value was? We sold every piece of property that we had for less than what we were owed. So I think that's a place to put. I believe that's the case. At or less, yes. But to your point, I think there are some practical things that as your administrator, we would do in the event we thought, because I think it's a very rational thought and a good thought to have, let's make sure we protect ourselves against liability. So how would we do that? We would essentially get an appraisal, which we have done of parcels, fair market appraisal of the parcel that we're going to sell, telling the appraiser, assume no covenants, no restrictive covenants or impairments on that transaction, and we'd have that value. Then if we sold it in the fair market sale amount that we got through Wisconsin surplus, which is our current approach, exceeded that amount, it's another piece of evidence. It's not the only argument to be made, right? Lawyers can argue about all things, but at least you have another piece to say, look, we have very good evidence that the covenant we put on did not unduly impinge on the fair market transaction because we ended up selling it for more than the appraised value that the certified appraiser did of the property. Because to Mike's point, the current market, as Mr. Sillers referenced, people are looking for parcels on which they can build. So putting a covenant on a lot that everyone looks at and says, geez, this is a good place for housing. When you're saying, hey, it should be housing, and we're saying you have to have housing on it in 2 years, good argument that you're not unduly kind of impairing that sale price. The utilization for short-term rental, I think, similar sort of logic can apply. I think that might be a little bit harder for us to work through, but we're working through that with Bayfield County as well. I mean, that's the question we pose to them. How are you handling this? And they're figuring it out. I'm confident if you want to go in this direction, we'd put in place the policies and operational practices to mitigate risk. And we'll figure it out. In terms of enforcement, I know I wanted to say one thing. Supervisor Lemmer asked this question of me, I think it was yesterday, like who would monitor this? Great question. The construction within 2 years, we'll have to figure that out. Essentially, the restriction is, hey, you need to be working to put housing on there. The short-term rental is somewhat easier because there is a process through which people get a license to operate a short-term rental, and that process is overseen by a county department. So we'd have a list of properties that, hey, you cannot receive a short-term rental license because of that covenant that exists on that property. And if an individual is utilizing property in that fashion without a license, there's likewise a penalty for that. So it's cleaner on the end of how do we police the short-term rental utilization, but we'd have to follow up. I mean, we're also not talking about 2,000 parcels we're going to sell. We went through 50 and we ended up selling 12, or we're going to end up selling 15. And a fair number of those are already have development on them. So it's not, I don't believe it's going to be some heavy insurmountable lift.
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you. I happen to have the housing study. I love this document. I'm a sucker for maps. There's some maps in here. Anyway, on page 43, it does talk about short-term rentals. And one of the things it says is, I'm going to read if you don't mind, Wisconsin state statute allows local government to regulate certain aspects of these properties, but does not allow local government to prohibit them. So was that a law change then, or how do we rectify what we're doing and that statement in here?
So under state statute, when we acquire a property by tax deed or other ways to acquire tax delinquent property, state statute says the county board can sell that property under any conditions the county board sees fit. So we are conditioning the sale on these particular conditions. That state law gives us the authority, and that's what other counties have relied on in putting these types of covenants in place. So that's how we would square it with those requirements.
And just to clarify, is it fair to say, Mike, that the prohibition that Supervisor Lemmer is talking about is a municipality, a county can't put in place a blanket prohibition on short-term rentals existing, and that's not what we're doing. This is a covenant that runs with the land for a time certain, which is the 10 years. So I think that's to Mike's point, that's the logic that other counties and that we would be relying upon.
Yep.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
If the lot isn't being built on in 2 years, what's the penalty or what happens to it?
That would depend on how we've written the condition of sale. The idea we've looked at in the past is, does it revert back to the county for resale? I don't know, when we're talking about tax delinquent properties, that's really the right remedy. So I don't have a really good answer for that, except it would be violating the existing covenant, and we'd have to figure out how the enforcement would work on that.
And we had done that. I mean, the county board, I shouldn't say we, you all have done that. When you have sold properties recently in the past, you put requirements on them that by virtue of the sale, like Mike said, we drafted it into the offer to purchase that was ultimately approved, that required housing to be constructed and occupancy within 2 years, with the condition that if that's not the case, the county retains the right, not saying you have to, but it retains the right to purchase the property back for what the individual or entity, in one case, the city of Wausau, paid for the property plus documented improvements. I think that's what we do.
Yeah, we've enforced that with a contract for sale. So when we put the sale together, one of the requirements is that the buyer signs a contract with us that says we'll abide by these conditions. Then if they don't, we have a legal action under the contract to enforce those requirements, and that could include having the parcel returned to the county or other legal remedies that we would choose to seek.
The other question I have is sort of practical, but you have 180 days to sell that property. How do you know you're going to get the best price in 180 days? And that the owner or the former owner now isn't going to come back and say, "Oh, you could have gotten much more for it." You know, I'm selling my used car and I want $10,000 for it, and it's not selling, so I go 8 and I go 6, and 3 months later it's worth 10 again. You know, hard to prove.
I mean, I think it's a fair question. How do we know that we'd be able to sell in 180 days? I mean, our recent practice and history suggests that we'll have pretty good luck there, but then we have a history before that of having properties on the tax rolls for many years before we got them sold. So the state law says we have to do it, so that's what we'll do, and we'll have to figure out a way to be compliant with that law and that legal requirement. If someone came back and said, well, you should have waited 240 days because the market was way different, I mean, I think we can point to the state law and say legal requirements that we are required to abide by said that we had to dispose of the property in this way, and we did, and we got the best value that we could. The appraisals that Lance mentioned, I think, bolster our position if we can point to an assessment done by someone who's not on our payroll that said this is what the value is of that property. I think that bolsters our position. Is it completely claim proof? Well, nothing that we do is completely claim proof, so I think we would be in a more solid position.
Supervisor Robinson.
To try to answer Supervisor Rosenberg's question, we've changed our process on how we sell our tax delinquent property now. The clerk works with the Wisconsin Surplus Property Program. Before, we used to advertise it locally, and I think that was kind of a hodgepodge system. By taking advantage of the state's surplus property program, we touch many more people, and there's therefore been a lot more interest in those properties. So we're able to generate additional interest, hopefully drive the prices higher for us to recover our back taxes and other costs associated with it. So I think our experience with that program to date has been very favorable. So I don't think, I think along the lines of Mike, if they defaulted and we took we were only taking properties through tax delinquency where people defaulted and they basically walked away from the property by not paying the taxes and the specials. So if we have a process in place consistent with state law, I don't think that there's a legitimate claim.
Other questions or discussion? Sure.
I have to go back to, sorry, I'm on. All right. I have to go back to the question of, does the house have to be built, complete in 2 years, or started? Okay.
Yeah, we're just having some conversation.
Yeah.
I think we were just having some conversations about maybe somehow it's tied to the permitting too. And then if we need to consider a little bit more the definition of buildable, because to Corey's point, depending on what the parcel has to deal with to be developed might take longer than 2 years sometimes if they did have to pursue something through FEMA or DNR, but maybe that's something we could make a determination ahead of selling the parcel. I don't know.
Yeah, and to my second point, if that's the case, then there's hopefully once it's getting permitted, it's getting zoning permits, it's getting building permits, that they may need an extension, like a one-time extension to complete it, and that should be documented.
Yeah, let's not remember, like we said, someone's got to enforce that, and we probably would be in the position of saying, do we want to buy it back? And the answer in those situations is no. So I think there's a lot of the general consideration, like Mike said, and you don't have to take any action. And the one other thing I wanted to add is I think this is on HR Finance next week as well, just for conversation, because HR Finance and Property had made substantial modification recommendations to the county board relative to section 3.20 not all that long ago. So they're very familiar and have been invested in kind of some of those changes, and we're recommending staff to look at additional changes. So as always, you don't need to take any action if you don't want to. If you do want to move it forward for further consideration, specifically to HR Finance, or you want to have more time, all those choices are available to you. Again, on the staff side, we would put in place the internal operating policies just like Lori and Jeff referenced. I mean, the process for us, if someone's not following hey, it's been 2 years, do we want to exercise what I think Mike and I both have envisioned, the right of the county to repurchase the property because it hasn't been built on? Even that process isn't going to go quick, right? We're going to come back with, work with the chair of the respective committee, get it on a committee agenda, try to have an understanding of, first of all, even before we do that, why is it not happening? Has there been a change in builder? Has there been a problem with financing? The goal that I think your committee has kind of laid out for staff to do is to look at opportunities and what are some strategies. This is just one. If this isn't something you want to do, we'll keep looking if you direct us to do so, but I wanted to bring a draft to you of something. And again, kudos to Mike. I think seeing the opportunity not only to, it really should be something that lives in ordinance, because time will move on and people will forget why we did what we did, or we'll forget it even happened. This way, it would live in your ordinance until you sought to repeal it, if it would be approved by the board.
Questions? Discussion? What are the wishes of the committee? Yes.
Thank you. The only question I have is, policy is supposed to go beyond, is supposed to live for a long time. So similar to what the administrator is talking about, are you making a change to address a temporary issue? Is that what's happening? Or is it something that would be lived for a long time? So that would be the only consideration I would say to you is, if you're going to make the recommendation to make the change, is it really something that might live in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years kind of a thing?
Supervisor Rosenberg.
I guess I'd like to see us advance these two resolutions and vote on them.
So that's your motion, is
Yes.
to advance to HR Finance and Property. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion? Yes.
Just a clarification. So the two resolutions before you, one is just the language for the conditions of sale. The other is that plus the ordinance changes. So they kind of duplicate each other. I interpret your motion as sending both to HR Finance for their consideration, but ultimately only one of these would really go to the county board because you wouldn't really need to pass both of them.
I'm happy to let them sort it out.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Yes. Supervisor Unger.
I don't know if it's too late to go back, but I thought, so if we have a buyer in that 24-month period, they bought the property and they sold it, what would come after that? I mean, I'm not sure if it specifies, but
Sure. So
it got lost. Maybe they didn't realize that they had
Yeah.
to abide by this 24.
one of the requirements that I wrote in here was that the deed restrictions would be recorded so that anytime there's a transaction with that property, they would know because it's recorded right there. They would be required to know. So then the next owner would still be subject to the same requirements. We wouldn't have a contract with that new owner. So as far as enforcement, a little bit down the line, but it would still be recorded and in place on that property.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to forward both of these to HR Finance and Property. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. And we will continue on to educational presentations and committee discussion we've got the report from McDevco. Thank you again, Corey. Have a great afternoon. McDevco's monthly report, she put it in our packet. Does anyone have any questions about anything in there? No? All right, we've got a thumbs up. We'll continue on. Library monthly report was also in our packet, and then we have UW Extension monthly report. Jeremy, did you have anything you wanted to let us know about?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick updates that might be of interest, and happy to answer questions about the report in there, but the Area Extension Director position an offer has been accepted on that, and we're doing background checks and everything on that, so nothing formal yet, but we expect that person will start March 9th. So you give me for one more month, and then we'll have a new person on board. And then just a note, I emailed you all yesterday, I think it was, just about position kind of considerations and travel. And again, we don't have anything open in Marathon County right now. I don't expect that we're going to have any issues, but that's kind of, we're paying a lot of attention to that right now, just waiting to see kind of what happens with federal funding. So, but happy to answer any questions about that, but happy we got the AED position in before anything happened there. So.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jeremy? No? Well, you will be missed. I'll let you know that. And then Supervisor Rosenberg, did you have anything?
Yeah, on the groundwater thing that you have there, is that the program that finds, that I've recently read about, that they're salt in so many wells? Is that discovering that or quantifying it?
Yes, I was just going back to that item in there. So there are a few different things that happen with groundwater. One of them is that we have the lab at UW Stevens Point does testing for salt and has been doing a lot of work there. So connected into there. Then we also have kind of all the work around agriculture management programs to address groundwater too. So yeah, there are a couple of different related programs. But yeah, definitely a lot of work going on related to salt right now. It's a major concern.
Anything else for Jeremy? No? All right, we will move on. UWSP monthly report. We have Miranda on WebEx, correct? Miranda, would you like to give us an update, please?
Yes. Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I can't join y'all in person today. We have illness sweeping through our office, and I'm the lone person holding down the fort this afternoon. But I really wanted to tell you about the dual enrollment pilot program that we have kicking off in the fall. And one of our big focuses this year has been on re-envisioning our dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment options for students. And so we were really happy when we were able to get funding for this particular pilot program. So what this is going to be a program that's allowing us to offer Intro to Sociology in the fall and an Introductory Astronomy class in the spring of 2026 to 35 high school students. So 35 of them will be able to choose, I'm sorry, I should say a total of 70 students, 35 in the fall and a different 35 in the spring. And where this program is a nice kind of intervention is that the schools we partnered with for this were Spash, DC Everest, Marshfield, Pittsville, and Edgar High Schools. And so we had asked the counselors to identify students who they think would be a good fit for a dual enrollment course, but who had found some barrier to taking either AP or dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment classes in the past. And what we're doing with this program is they are courses that are going to be taught by UWSP staff. They are going to be asynchronous online courses, and that decision was made because one of the barriers we found in talking with schools is that with dual enrollment courses that are taught by the UW faculty, it's hard to fit those into a high school timetable because our times and their times don't line up perfectly. And so that's why these are going to be asynchronous online classes. Students, but we know that with asynchronous online instruction, it can be a little bit harder for students to feel a sense of connection with the instructor. So instructors are going to have virtual office hours every week. They will have virtual appointments that students can sign up for. And students are also going to have an academic success coach that they're in contact with, and that academic success coach is going to be able to monitor student progress in the course by looking in Canvas and seeing, like, okay, are they logging in every week? Are they getting their assignments submitted? And so both the academic success coach and instructor will be able to make or get students connected with the Tutoring and Learning Center. And these are classes that transfer very well throughout the University of Wisconsin system and really anywhere. And that was another one of the considerations in choosing these particular courses. So fall 2025 is when this program is going to kick off. We are really excited for that. This program will get assessed every year to make sure that it's working well for the high schools, that it's working, that the students are having a good experience with the instructors, that the courses are working out well, that students are able to complete the work in a reasonable amount of time. And so the initial MOU is for that first year, but there is the possibility for it to be extended for up to 3 years. And I don't think I mentioned yet, but the other thing that I'm really happy about with this program is that it's being offered at no cost to students. And it is the only dual enrollment option that we have at this point that is like that will be no cost to students or to the schools. So I would welcome any questions about that.
Thank you for that. I guess one question would be, we are wondering why the Wausau schools weren't included. Is that because they have a planetarium at Wausau West?
Yes. So in selecting the schools, so we were trying to pick schools that are close to each of the UWSP campuses, and particularly schools where that have asked us for more dual enrollment options, or schools where counselors had let us know that students were not able to find good dual enrollment options. And so we have not heard that from Wausau East or Wausau West. And it is, and we were limited in the amount of funding that we have, and so couldn't include as many schools as we wanted to, but we are doing a broader re-envisioning of our full dual and concurrent enrollment program, and we are absolutely talking with the Wausau School District about that.
Okay, great. Supervisor Rosenberg?
Do you have the numbers for the spring enrollment and compare them to years past?
Sure. So we don't have official spring enrollment data yet. We will in the next week or so, and so we'll be able to share that next time. But I will say we're always going to be down a little bit from fall to spring because we have a lot of students who stay on our campus for 3 semesters before they transfer on. Well, okay, so I'll say that. So if a student is going to be completing their education on the Stevens Point campus, we have a lot who will stay with us for 3 semesters, so fall, spring, fall. And so that's where we'll always see some attrition from fall to spring. And the numbers won't be dramatically down, but they will be down a little bit. And I will be happy to share the official numbers next time we meet.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else for Miranda? No, thank you very much. Stay healthy.
Thank you. I will certainly try to.
All right, we'll move on to 7E, discussion on Chapter 4 of the Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, and we'll kick it over to Lori Miskimmons. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in your packet today is Chapter 4 of the Comprehensive Plan. As the board as the committee might remember, last year when we were updating the comprehensive plan to incorporate the farmland preservation edits we talked about in 2025, we were going to be going through every chapter of the comprehensive plan. So that's what we're engaged in right now, is taking it a chapter or two at a time and starting working drafts in order to update the data and update the issues and the objectives. And then as we go through each chapter, we're identifying which committees align with the chapters and taking them, the working drafts, to those committees to start to get your input on what needs to be changed. Are there new issues that need to be captured? Are there data or efforts that we're missing that you want to make sure that we incorporate into that update? So what I put in there is very much a working draft. I'm going to ask Christian Bollinger from the Regional Planning Commission to walk through some of the data that they have started to update just quickly. So we have started to go through and make some changes to the data, but there's several areas where we still have to make changes, including the homeless service section. We started meeting with the outreach specialist at the City of Wausau. She provided us some new data. I know there's a lot of new data that's been presented to the homelessness task force too that we intend to incorporate into the chapter. But we have been getting some of the data updates in there. Still some more to go. But then we also just want to have an initial conversation with you all about what the issues are as it relates to community character and housing within the county, and what issues you would like to see sort of identified in the update, and talk a little bit about the objectives as well. But I'll let Christian run through the data really quickly.
Yep, thank you. So I'm Christian Belanger, planner with the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, working with my boss, Dennis Lawrence, to update this comprehensive plan. As you can tell, it's quite similar to the last updated plan, but I thought I would just go through and highlight some of the numbers and data that I did add and update for this plan. First, I'll just real quick talk about, or just point to, the previous plans and studies that I added to the plan. If there's anything else that I missed in terms of past studies over the last 10 years, I'm willing to add those to the plan as well. So looking into the housing section on page 2 is where we start to dive into a little bit of the data. So then page 3 is where I'll just start. The data we used comes from the 2020 Census and American Community Survey data. So keep that in mind as we look at data. I understand that things have changed over the last 4 years, 5 years. So, but that's what we went with for consistency purposes. So looking at the data, just real quick at figure 5 or 4.1, comparing the housing across the region, several of the nearby counties. You can tell that owner-occupied units are higher in this county versus the rest of the region. And as of 2020, over 71% of the total housing stock is classified as owner-occupied. So that's a strong number. And as I said, it's greater than the rest of the counties around it. Going to the next page, I have another table that just highlights the housing units per municipality throughout the county. Again, it's a lot there, a lot of municipalities in the county, but So I won't go through that in too much detail, but it's all there to look at. And if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer that. On the next page, we talk a little bit about seasonal housing. And that, as a county that doesn't have a ton of seasonal housing, it's not an area that we focus too much on this comp plan. But as many of you know, the eastern part of the county does have some seasonal housing units that we do identify in the plan. In terms of changes in housing stock, over the last 10 years, between 2010 and 2020, there have been some changes. The amount of housing that have been added is less. The rate has been less than what we've seen in the past, obviously contributing to the housing shortage that we have today. We do have a growing number of renter-occupied housing that increased over 17%. So that's something to keep an eye on. And vacancy overall has decreased quite a bit too, obviously, as what was vacant is quickly being bought up over the last few years. Going to the next page, so page 6, housing age. Similarly, most of the county has kind of an aging housing stock, but as we continue to add housing units, we're hoping to have that median age of housing in the county continue to be a little on the younger than what it currently is. Physical characteristics is another section we add, so there's not much there. Page 7, we look at housing values. Again, housing values have increased, but we know over the last few years that number has increased dramatically. But in figure 4.4, that just looks at a little bit of the regional housing values across the region. Marathon County is kind of right in the middle. Portage County is higher, and the state, of course, is also higher. 4.5, figure 4.5, the range of housing values, you can see homes above 200,000 have increased significantly. It's becoming harder and harder to find a home under 200,000. So that's something that is new. Of course, over the last 10 to 15 years, homes have just become more and more expensive. And there's also a big jump from homes that are over $500,000. Going to the next page, page 8, housing affordability. Again, it's kind of the theme. You're continually seeing more and more people that are spending more than 35% of their income on housing. You can see in figure 4.6, housing affordability. Marathon County is still considered pretty affordable compared to the neighboring counties. But you are seeing a growing number of people spending more than 35% of their income, which is not the trend that we really would like to see. And I think that takes me to the end of the housing data that I was going to present on, so I'll turn it back to Lori.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the initial cut of the issues that we have that starts on page 15 of the draft. These issues were largely derived from the previous version in 2016, but we've gone through and started to try and trim and combine or try and characterize what we think the issues are right now. But again, as I've said, this is a working draft, so that's why we're bringing it to you all to sort of get some input. Right now, the issues that we have outlined or identified in the draft chapter 4 include the rising housing cost and housing supply. Obviously, this committee's been talking a lot about that, and that there's many factors influencing that, and just identifying that the county cannot control all these factors, but we can continue to examine where policies and ordinances can assist, like you talked about today with deed restrictions and things like that when we're selling county-owned parcels. Another thing we hear a lot about is housing rehabilitation. This topic comes up especially in our rural areas more, where we get phone calls quite often from town officials wondering how they can deal with a deteriorated structure, what options there are to get that raised and then rebuilt or removed. So that also goes into the scattered rural housing development, where there is a lot of those deteriorated structures, and they might serve as an opportunity, if we could get them rebuilt, to build new housing in the rural areas while also balancing preserving that farmland that our rural communities worry about. Homelessness, I know there is, again, a task force that is meeting on this, and I guess as of yesterday, the goal is now to keep meeting into the spring, and there's going to be some recommendations coming back from that group. So I think we'll have that opportunity to capture some of that and what we see the county's role is going forward as it relates to homelessness, but it is a growing problem, and like I said, we do have actually a lot more data that we can add into this chapter after meeting with the City of Wausau outreach specialists. So we'll be getting that in there too. Senior housing and services continue to be an issue for the county as well. Just identifying where we need senior housing and making sure wherever they are located that they have the services they need as well to get around, to do their errands, to get their medical services, things like that. So in this chapter, we also touch on planning, maintenance, and coordination, just about making sure that the importance of keeping our planning up to date, and especially with our towns as well, making sure that they have up-to-date comprehensive plans so that we can understand where visions and goals align. So when the county is having to make choices, we know what all of our communities feel as well. And then just in general, talking about livability, making sure that we are providing a livable place for everyone to live, work, recreate, get around, all of those things. So that's just an ongoing goal or issue for most communities, is that they want people to come here and feel like it's a livable community. So some other things that we identified that might need to be addressed somewhere in the chapter or perhaps as an issue is just some things I know that we've been working on. I know the county, I call it the county land swapping idea. The administrator has us working on looking at the government or the county-owned parcels in the county and proximity to existing services like sewer and water, just to see if there's opportunities to possibly get more development in those areas where services already exist. I think this is an idea that Bayfield County has pursued, so it's just an analysis we're looking into right now as well. The county is going to also be taking up the comprehensive zoning code update, so that's starting this year as well, where we're working with our county zone towns to update our zoning code. So definitely there's going to be lots of opportunity to talk through the ERC with that idea of if there's anything else we can be doing in our code to balance rural character, but also create opportunities for new housing stock. And then, of course, the deed restrictions that you just talked about today with county-controlled parcels, moving forward with those types of ideas. So again, this is a working draft right now. I just want to open it up for discussion in terms of other things people think need to be captured, or if there's data points we're missing. Any direction or comments are welcome at this point.
Comments, questions, discussion. Supervisor Rosenberg?
Thank you. It's hard to, the numbers in your tables are 2010, 2020. There's been such changes to this point that the 2020 numbers are not very useful. Is there a way to bleed in numbers that are more current?
Yeah, it's tricky because if we can, we like to use 2020, incorporate U.S. Census data when we can. There is certainly newer data out there. The American Community Survey is another source that we rely on. I think we're definitely open to incorporating some narratives or potentially newer data where we can, because I know, to your point, things have changed over the last 4 or 5 years, especially with housing. So I think we can definitely look at incorporating some different numbers or some narratives that highlight the changes to the housing market.
Even just adding an appendix, see Appendix D or something, and I mean, you don't have to change the format or anything, because 2030 you probably want those numbers, but just sort of hold it, don't look at this and think you're going somewhere.
Supervisor Lemmer?
Thank you. I appreciate this document. Again, I'm a geek for maps and charts and whatnot. I am the chair of the ADRC, and I'm very concerned about our aging folks. I'm glad it's in here, but I just got an update on the Alice report, and our seniors are really struggling. I can't remember the official numbers, but I think it went from last year, which is asset limited, income constrained, and employed, and they consider somebody who's a senior 60 and up, and they may be working or they may be getting Social Security or other benefits, and that's why they include them in the employed section. But it went from like 39 to 43%, rapidly increasing. And then I think about Marathon County, and I think about how we've got an urban center and then some very rural, and the needs for those groups of people are very different. And again, you've got it in here, but I would love to have some more awareness of the transportation needs that are needed for our rural seniors, especially because we want them aging in place, but sometimes getting them to appointments and to their social activities and other things it's pretty difficult to do.
I have a question. So with your renter occupied housing units, is there a way to know if those properties are locally owned or are they owned by entities outside the community?
Not from the data source that I used. I'm not sure if there's anything out there that would tell us that information. That's something I can look into because that might be useful information. So I can look into that.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious because you hear of entities like BlackRock and Vanguard coming in and scooping up properties and then renting them out. So I was just wondering if our county is being impacted by that at all or not. So thank you. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much for.
I'll just add at this
Oh, go
point,
ahead.
so we will be talking with the executive about this chapter as well next week, and then we'll go back to the drawing board and get some more information in there, and then there'll be a more complete draft later this year. So.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, that takes us down to number 8, next meeting date and time, announcements and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. So next month, we will be hearing from Synergy, and we'll be discussing TIF again, so that will be exciting. And I guess I would appreciate an update from the homelessness task force for what they've accomplished and discussed so far. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 6th at 3 o'clock. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. From Rosenberg, second by Seefeld. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Have a great night. Thank you very much. Bare ankles. I keep looking at Anne's ankles. How can you have bare ankles today? It must just be.
Good question on that, who owns that rental property? 'Cause I'm seeing more and more of it